So he asked me to take over for him today. Today we're very happy to have a guest webinar in the RDC webinar series being presented by Chuck Humphrey, who's the director of the Portage Network. If you have any questions for Chuck or for me, please type them into the chat or QA window on your screen at the bottom, and they'll be responded to at the end of the presentation. I will collect them and I will forward them on to Chuck. So a bit more on our presenter. Chuck is the director of the Portage Network, as I mentioned, and he's been in that role since 2015. Prior to that, he supported data services at the University of Alberta since 1992, and he's worked on numerous regional, national, and international initiatives to increase access to data for teaching and research purposes. He was involved in the OECD Global Science Forums on Data and Research Infrastructure for the Social Sciences in 2010 and 2011, and on Ethics and Big Data in 2014 and 2015. Chuck was also the lead investigator on a University of Alberta Library's successful application for a data center in the Canadian International Polar Year Data Assembly Centers Network, which has now become the Canadian Polar Data Network. He currently is serving on the steering committee of Research Data Canada, and he's a board member of the Consortia Advancing Standards in Research Administrative Information. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Chuck to go on with his presentation. Welcome everyone to the webinar.
Ella?
Yes.
Can you confirm that you can hear me?
We can hear you and we can see your screen. Great,
thank you. Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar on the Portage Network. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and thank Mark Leggett and Research Data Canada for this opportunity. I have framed this talk around a significant challenge that arose during the second Digital Infrastructure Summit that was held on January 29 in 2014. That was an important event because that was where research data management and expertise in digital infrastructure became widely recognized as part of digital infrastructure. That is in addition to advanced research computing as well as a high-speed research network. But while being recognized, there was also a challenge that went with that. There was a concern about whether or not Canada had capacity in these areas. Does Canada have the capacity for research data management? Does Canada have the research expertise that it requires? And so using that as a framework, I wanted to discuss today what Carl has been doing over the last 16 months in this area, developing capacity both around expertise in research data management, but also research data management infrastructure. This is a notice that this webinar is being recorded, and that if you may or may not be identified from the questions you ask or the comments you make, so you're now notified of that. And Ella has said that she'll put the slides from this presentation on the RDC website after the webinar, so those will be made available to you if you wish. CARL itself is a nonprofit organization of Canada's 29 largest university libraries and 2 federal institutions, Library and Archives Canada and the National Research Council's Science Library. CARL is actively involved in advancing access to knowledge and promoting information policies and scholarly communication practices that end up supporting all types of digital and non-digital collections, research collections, including research data. Carl is been involved in this area of research data management for several years, so it's not that it's a newcomer. We've been working as the library community in supporting research data management, specifically data from data providers, into back as far as the 1990s, but actually working with researchers on our campuses with their data is a more recent development. And Carl became active in this with this slide that I've shown you here, some of the activities leading up to it. In fact, we had in 2010, 2011, an application for major research infrastructure grant, and that unfortunately didn't have a funding envelope that matched the intention of a platform fund or a horizontal funding form. But that exercise of spending the time in developing that became important to us in what we're doing now, and we've approached how we fund the infrastructure in different ways. You can see that we've been that there was a pilot initiated in December 2013. That January 2014 digital infrastructure summit that I mentioned came right on the heels of starting this pilot. That propelled us into some federated pilots that led to 2015 of moving from a pilot into an operation, and then what's not on there is the first director for Portage beginning in September of 2015. So I just put this up primarily so that you realize that Carl has been involved in this space for some time. This is a crowded space. There are lots of stakeholders involved in digital research. This is, I think, a particularly helpful slide for looking at 4 particular functions: direction, services, support, and use. But it's not intended to be a comprehensive portrayal of all Canadian stakeholders in this space. In fact, Research Data Canada has a current project where they're working on the research data management ecosystem that will give a more comprehensive view. So stay tuned for developments from that Research Data Canada project. So I just wanted to note that not only are these 4 functional roles significant ones, and you see organizations around them or communities around them, but it's that data research data management itself flows across all 4 of those functions. You can see that Carl Portage is identified under the service sections, and Research Data Canada is identified under direction. This gives me an opportunity to talk about the relationship that exists between Research Data Canada and Portage. Research Data Canada is an organization that is providing the stakeholders in this space some sense of direction. It's a forum for stakeholders in this area to come together to help identify national directions. Portage, on the other hand, is focused on operations, providing services around research data management and infrastructure around research data management, but specifically to the academic research community. Now, this does cut across other sectors because a lot of our academic researchers are also engaged with other sectors, the federal government, provincial governments, private sector, etc. Research Data Canada has a broader sector focus, in that they're attempting to bring together stakeholders across all sectors. So there you can see the relationship between Research Data Canada and Portage. All of this, because of the extent of players in this space, requires collaboration, and collaboration at multiple levels. So this diagram is to represent 3 important levels in which Portage is engaged. There's at the lowest level in terms of where research activity occurs, the research project. There are all the research projects that occur within an institution. And then there's the network. And by network, I'm referring to an organizational network. I'm not talking about a physical technology network. Here I'm talking about collaboration among regional and national partnerships. One thing about Portage is that we focus on working with libraries in institutions. And so not all of the connections between Portage and research projects are direct, but there are actually many of them that are indirect. That is, they flow through an institution to research projects on campuses. If we look at a campus setting, we see the different stakeholders involved. Clearly, the researchers and graduate students are engaged in project-level activity, but then we have the other organizations on the campus that help make up that support environment for researchers and graduate students. Libraries, IT, Research Service Office, Ethics Office. And it's how do we coordinate the services that we provide researchers and graduate students in research data management that does it in a coordinated way. And even in our campuses, we tend to have our activities organized in silos. And so one of the key aspects around research data management is the opening of conversations between these different service departments and units to better support in a coordinated way our researchers. In this effort to do a coordinated delivery, what we're really trying to do is save researchers time and not having to be bounced between service and service. If you look at the campus setting at a national level, you have organizations that actually represent the professionals working on campuses in libraries, IT, Research Service Office, Ethics, etc. So if you look at the libraries in the upper left-hand corner of the slide, you see that they're represented by regional library consortia, which I'll talk about in a moment, as well as CARL. If you look at IT, it's represented by the National CIO organization. Research service offices are represented by the Association of Canadian Research Administrators, ethics by the Canadian Association of Research Ethics Boards. So what Portage is doing is we're working with these organizations at the national level to coordinate activities that we can share then at a campus level. So it's getting this collaboration with the professionals and setting directions nationally for their professional members at a campus. If we understand, this relationship now at the national level and go back to the institutional level for a moment, I've shown you here a generalized life cycle model for research data. And the distinction here is that the salmon-colored stages of a life cycle are at the project level, and the yellow or gold-colored stages are at the institutional level. And it's that kind of relationship that we're trying to support and develop between services supporting research on a campus and researchers themselves. We're looking at ways in which the arrows that connect between the stages in the project level to institutional services are smooth and well planned. And that's where data management plans come in, and I'll mention that in a moment. This is another representation of research life cycle. This one comes from JISC and the Digital Curation Center in the UK. But in this case, if you look at the way they're represented and you split the clock, on the right hand of the clock, you have activities that are occurring at the research project level, and then the activities on the left are occurring at the institution. And why this is particularly meaningful is to get us to talk about stewardship, that is responsibilities who's responsible for ensuring that those different stages of the life cycle are completed successfully. And this is another way of representing that stewardship, that is, those who are responsible for life cycles. Rather than portraying it as a simple life cycle model, it's organized by phases of research, the pre and post research phase, during the research phase. And you'll see that within each of those phases, there are stages, and identified with the stage is whether it's primarily an institutional responsibility, or whether it's primarily a researcher responsibility, or if it's a joint responsibility. And this is particularly important because stewardship, the sense of who's responsible for the data in a particular stage in the research life cycle, is part of a larger representation of a research data culture. And what we're really talking about are what are the values, norms that provide an understanding or guide practices in research data. And there are probably three primary manifestations of these values and norms. They're around a culture of use. We certainly have seen this developing around evidence-based actions, whether it's evidence-based medicine or evidence-based policymaking, et cetera. There's also a data culture of sharing that has emerged, and this is providing access to research data to others. And then there is this culture of stewardship, and that's taking responsibility for research data over the long term. We're seeing policy statements reflective of these core values. This is a policy statement from the Tri-Agency on principles of digital research data. And this highlighted or quoted section touches on the three aspects of sharing, use, and stewardship. The Tri-Agency statement also describes what we would consider practices that support these values. And data management planning is at the top of the list, and you see other practice areas mentioned that's included in their statement. And all of those practices address aspects of wider practices around replication, discovery, and reuse, and that's where we'll be headed with the discussion around research data management later in this presentation. So Portage has some principles as well, but these aren't so much principles around research data management as they are operating principles. Certainly, they're operating principles in the context of research data, but you'll see we're addressing things like intelligent access, that is the openness, collaborative approaches for our operations, the sense of inclusiveness, and that we're supporting researchers across all institutions, not just the 29 CARL member institutions, that we respect differences for different regions in the country, institutions and disciplines, and this responsibility of stewardship that we also embrace. So Portage has built on these operational principles. So we move into Portage. As I make a shift into more about what Portage is all about in this context that I've built in the previous 18 slides. We're really talking about working with other stakeholders in developing a community of practice, and specifically Portage working with our library cultures in building this a data stewardship culture. If you look at the Portage website, you'll see that we have identified 4 primary communities in which we feel a particular connection. This includes our researchers, our librarians and data stewards, those providing infrastructure, as well as policymakers and administrators. A particular example is our research councils. So our service model is built on this notion of a federated approach to leveraging contributions from our libraries and partnering stakeholders. There's a paper that discusses this more fully as a service approach. Critical to our service model is a relationship between Portage and the 4 regional library consortia that make up Canada. On the in Western Canada, we have the Council of Prairie and Pacific University Libraries. The Ontario Council of University Libraries is its own consortium, its own region. BCI is Quebec region, and then in Atlantic Canada, we have the Council of Atlantic University Libraries. These are important to us because they capture for us a coverage of Canada's higher education institutions. It's through this that we get a comprehensive access to universities. This federated service model is built around really 2 components. One is a network of expertise, and the other is around platforms that support data management planning, curation, preservation, and discovery. We have a distributed model for our network of expertise. They're located in individual institutions, but they provide their advice to a national network. This addresses those earlier comments that I was talking about initially about concerns of does Canada have capacity for research data management, and our approach has been to do this on a very federated and approach with our own network of expertise, building on what we have, and moving forward. You'll see later in this presentation that I have the examples of after the first 16 months where we're going next, and you get a sense of the growing nature of the involvement in this network of expertise. This is a framework that we use to describe our services. You'll notice the second row is the Portage network of expertise, and the bottom row is the identified platforms that support those particular expert groups. The model itself is based primarily on institutional support for research data management. So you'll see that the curation, preservation, discovery are really addressing institutional support of research data. Data management plans apply to researchers and research projects, and help facilitate that transition of data from a project into an institutional service. And it's that those arrowheads that I mentioned earlier in that diagram. It's that making sure that transition from stewardship from a project into the stewardship at an institution goes smoothly, and a data management plan is helpful in that regards. We also have 2 expert groups that support the activity of those 4 primary expert groups. I'll talk more about the platforms in a moment. Our expert groups, the members of them make a commitment of 2 years, and then the expert groups themselves organize activities by forming working groups, and those working groups are very task specific and have a very limited time period for the delivery of those tasks, and it's 3 to 6 months. The chairs of these expert groups have their own council, and that is to bring them together to talk about overlap across the groups, because while we have nice boxes to identify areas, there clearly is a dynamic that flows through all of this that needs to be coordinated, and we do short and longer term planning together and look at budgets. This is a layout of the current membership of our expert groups. The data management planning expert group at the top has 16 members. It's the largest because it was actually formed before Portage was underway. It was formed around the launch of the data management planning platform that's being supported by Portage through a partnership with the University of Alberta. You'll see that there's currently 16 members representing 14 different institutions. The curation expert group has 5 members. The preservation expert group has 4. The discovery expert group has 6. The training expert group has 7, and the research intelligence expert group has 6. That gives us 44 expert group positions, but 33 individuals fill those 44 because some of them do serve on multiple expert groups. But that gives us a core of 33 experts from 19 institutions. The discovery expert group has 2 working groups underway. And I just present this slide to give you a sense of the regional distribution of members there. One's working on metadata for discovery, and others working on collection development policy for data repositories. And you'll see that we have representation from the different regions in Canada. And together with the 33 individuals who are serving in the expert network of expertise, and we've got another 22 that are in working groups, that we have 55 professionals currently working with us in supporting research data management in our expertise model. So we have good involvement, and this is part of the library community's commitment to research data as a core service, and as it's emerging as a core service. So the research data management infrastructure, that's the RDMI acronym, we work on that around a framework, because we're building this from the bottom up. We don't have investments to build things from the top down. Rather, we're saying what functions have to be performed to support research data management institutionally, and that bridge research project levels to the institutions. And so we have identified a series of major functions, and then on the basis of those major functions have broken them down into sub-functions and microservices, and we try to assemble then a supportive structure that we can build from the bottom up in complementing what's required for our support. So this is a hypothetical functional framework for a research data repository, and each of those boxes represents a basic microservice layer that's required. And so one can see that you could build a research data repository that has most of those or all of those functions. But what we look for is then partnering with an infrastructure provider who will satisfy the microservices that we require for different platforms. This is another representation that incorporates both the project level, that's the yellow 3 functional areas in the diagram, with an institutional level, and then in the top is a discovery reuse layer, and so we're trying to articulate what partnerships we can build with infrastructure providers to fill in these areas. I can say that in a moment I'll mention a project that's involving a new partnership around Jupyter, which is a platform for data science, which is a reuse of data that would fit, say, in that top layer. So let's look at some of the platforms that we have developed. And I mentioned the Data Management Planning Assistant as a key platform. This was launched in October 2015. Since then, there's been some added functionality to this. It is a bilingual tool, so we internationalized through our project this particular platform, which came from the Digital Curation Center. Since we've been working with this platform, the Digital Curation Center has joined forces with a major US platform for data management planning called DMP Tool out of the California Digital Library. They're creating a unified code base for a tool, and the University of Alberta and its support of DMP Assistant is part of that collaboration. And there's within 2 weeks there's a meeting announcing the next generation of this tool as development continues. This platform has been used for a few pilot projects. The International Development and Research Council has used this in piloting the use of DMPs with their research community. The Social Science Humanities Research Council used this with 13 funded projects and had a capstone event on January 24th and reviewing it, and most of the feedback was quite positive from the research community. This is an example of the landing page for that platform. It's available to anyone and everyone on the internet, so it is already available to the research community. It's built around templates. A template structures the content of a data management plan, and the template that is being used by these pilots with funding agencies is one developed by the DMP expert group, and it's known as a data stewardship template. It's a generic policy. We're also working with Compute Canada, and have been since January 2016, to develop an integrated data repository that will support preservation, processing, and discovery services. This is a 2-year development project. What we're attempting to do is to develop a platform that plays well with other research data management platforms, and can provide services to other platforms. So, for example, the scalable preservation processing service is one that the Federated Research Data Repository can provide other data repositories and other data collections. And then there's a discovery layer that also can be shared with others, and provide a way of searching across multiple data collections and data repositories. What we have now is the data discovery engine completed, and basic components of the repository. We've collaborated with UBC's collections development user interface, and it was adopted in December 2016. That's a situation where there was a well-developed, high-quality product from UBC that the project team is now making bilingual and sharing code back. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the partners that become involved. And you can see at the bottom that it involves Compute Canada, Globus, Portage, UBC, and it's open to other partners who want to bring contributions to a data repository. We're currently in alpha test mode. Early summer will be or late spring will begin beta testing, and plan to be in production January 2018. We're also in discussions for other partnerships. One is Dataverse North, looking at multi-institutional agreement to provide access to Dataverse repository instances. And in this current discussions, we're looking at how Dataverse will be supported by different regions, and how we can collaborate then under the umbrella of Portage, access to those regional services to that particular platform. I mentioned the Jupyter notebooks in a previous slide. This is a discussions occurring with the Pacific Institute of Mathematical Sciences, and that's working together to get support for data repository interoperability with the analytic tools that are provided in Jupyter notebooks. And this is my last slide. It gives you a representation of where we're moving now that we have 16 months of growth in our network of expertise, as well as partnerships around infrastructure platforms. We see the libraries in Canada as being critical partners in the delivery of research data management to our local communities, our local campuses. So we have a variety of user communities working with our campus communities, and Portage Network, through its network of expertise, supports services on local campuses. And if invited, we'll work with, if invited by a local campus to work with researchers, we will also work directly with researchers. The Federated Research Data Repository, the Dataverse North, the DMP Assistant, those other platforms are also part of the service model. Our expertise groups are aligned with particular platforms to give us a support to the university libraries and to the user community around the use of those applications. We see this as also our connection to working with other data repositories, whether they're domain repositories or a large government repository such as Open Data. So that is the direction we're heading. We're seeking some funding to expand the staffing to support increased coverage of non-CARL institutions. And we have a commitment right now from CARL member contributions through 2018. So thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back now to Ella for any comments or questions.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, there were a couple of questions that came in. So the first one is from PolicyWise, Sage, and the question is: Portage appears to be very focused on academic institutions. Is there more of a role for non-institutional researchers or research organizations like us?
So when we look at our mandate, and our mandate is to support academic research, there is oftentimes an overlap by our research community with other organizations, whether in other sectors. And so in that sense, we do become engaged through the diverse research that's conducted by our own academic research community. But on the other hand, there's also the fact that we're working at a national level and engaged in these conversations with in Research Data Canada, as well as some of the other initiatives like Open Science, where we are at the table and can provide some assistance. So, for example, the DMP Assistant is available to any researcher in any sector, and it's a tool that's that can be used as just an open web service. So there will be areas where the support will be driven around the needs of academic research data management, but there will also be collaborations with other sectors where it particularly makes sense.
Thank you. While we're on the topic of DMPs, the question is, given that DMPs are, as far as I know, not a mandatory requirement for Tri-Council funding, are there some other Canadian examples of completed DMPs used for other grant funding bodies?
Yes, in fact, the SSHRC, the Social Science Humanities Research Council capstone event that I mentioned, there was a researcher there who worked with both the National Science Foundation's data management planning tool in the States, as well as the data stewardship template that we have in Canada. And we got some very good feedback from him about how the Canadian template actually helped him think about how he would respond to a future NSF data management plan. So there's an example where there was a crossover by a researcher. We also have had interest from some larger consortia, research consortia. So there's MEOPAR, which is an oceans research center of excellence, and they work with the federal level, regional, St. Lawrence level researchers and fisheries researchers tracking mammals and sea mammals, etc. So it's a wide area, they have looked at incorporating the use of data management plans as well. I think those who've gone through a data management plan in preparing research, we had some feedback where people say, yeah, I'm happy to know that as we did our research, we covered most of these. And it's reassuring that we were on the right track. It would have been helpful if we would have done this earlier. And so we'll think about it the next time we start a project, doing it earlier. But there are also some things that you brought out in your data management plan that we hadn't considered. And one of them that was mentioned a couple times was around succession planning. What happens to the stewardship responsibilities for research data in a project if the PI leaves or if the data manager leaves? Do they have plans for who takes on those responsibilities? We had one research team said, as soon as we read that, we realized that we had to go back and call a meeting right away and settle that. So there are things to learn from going through the data management plan, even for well-experienced researchers.
Thank you. Another question related to that. Despite offering many DMP system seminars at UVic for the past 2 years, we have only started the conversation, and the feedback seems to focus around the extra work required and the lack of a real mandate, despite our assurance that DMP will save time as a project management tool, and the lack of a real mandate. How soon is it anticipated that a tri-agency mandate might be implemented?
Coming out of the January capstone that I keep mentioning with the Social Science Humanities Research Council, they are continuing their discussion with their community, their research community, around the introduction of a data policy by the end of this year. And that data and a data management plan will be part of the implementation of that data policy. Now, how a data management plan implemented is still up for debate. That is, does a data management plan become part of the review process for a grant application, or is it like an ethics requirement, something that the institution signs off and says that the researcher has completed in compliance with the requirements for? And that's a part of the discussion that SSHRC will be continuing to have with its research community. I expect that that you'll see an approach that may start with just introducing data management plans as a requirement, but it's not part of the review process, but it may grow into the review process. Now, we're also working with CIHR and providing some training modules around research data management. And one of those modules that they requested was a reviewer's perspective on data management plans. What criteria should they be considering to review the data management plan? And so they're at least at this stage interested in knowing what kind of requirements, training requirements are required by reviewers to introduce the use of data management plans. So this is just with CIHR an initial approach to dealing with implementation, and it's one that's around getting reactions from their community through training modules that they're introducing. With NSERC, there was a meeting within the last, well, it was a week ago, Friday, in which they're looking at what is involved in the area of research data management. They have a tri-agency working group on data management, and all three of those councils are represented on that working group. And NSERC is now at a point where I think they're wanting to become more informed about what the alternatives are for how a data management plan could become part of their data policy, or a data policy for their agency.
Thank you, Chuck. We have two more questions. One is, can you clarify the distinction between the Federated Research Data Repository and Dataverse?
Oops. Yes, a Federated Research Data Repository is a software development project with Compute Canada, and so it has functionality that has been identified to work within an environment where there are other data repositories. So as I mentioned in my presentation about going from the hypothetical stack of functions that are supported by microservices, the Federated Research Data Repository is being assembled to support a lot of those key microservices. Dataverse is a software product that comes from the US, from Harvard, where they have ongoing development happening, and has had good uptake internationally, and has become a particular platform of interest in a few European countries to provide that fundamental data repository service for some of their national services. So it's a valuable tool that has some functionality that is, I think, rather unique to its operations, and I think it would be a nice complement to the Federated Research Data Repository. The way we look at this is that there is not going to be one tool that satisfies the diversity of disciplines and the variety of research data out of those disciplines, and that there's different functionality that will develop around the way domains curate their research data, the way they prefer to have the standards that they prefer to implement. And so what we're looking at is to respond to that diversity by supporting different platforms. And like I said, the key for us is that those platforms play well together. And if that means in some instances that we need to have middleware that helps bridge some of this, so we'll seek to do that. But that's the nature of building something from the bottom up is taking the strengths with what exists now and the goodwill of infrastructure providers to collaborate with us to assemble this environment.
Thank you. And we have one final question, and that's how much enforcement do you think should be attached to data management plans? Who will follow up with researchers to see that they have in fact deposited their data according to their plan?
Well, the evolving nature of data management plans is that they're now being seen as most valuable if they're treated as an active data management plan. That is, that the plan is something that is updated and maintained throughout a project lifecycle. And in that sense, it becomes an important tool for the researcher, both in terms of recording the progress they're making, the directions and the decisions they make in data management across a project, and having that fully documented in a data management plan. And that becomes, in one sense, a data management report at the end of a project. It becomes valuable for providing contextual information, contextual metadata for other users of the research data. So that is one movement that we're seeing with data management plans is that they're not just something that is done once at the beginning of a project, but they have an important role to play throughout the life of a project. And that will become probably much more integrated with just general program management practices in research data management. But I also want to draw to people's attention that the support to now make data management plans a type of scholarly publication that is assigning digital object identifiers to data management plans so that they can be cited, and creating placing them in repositories where they can be identified. And so that the data management plans, just as there are methodology sections in many scholarly journal requirements of scholarly journals, there may be in the future a data management requirement in a general article layout, and that data management plans would then be linked through the emerging information technology for scholarly publishing. So if that's the case, if that's a direction that we have, both say active data management planning and the potential of publishing data management plans, then I think this whole thing about who's going to be evaluating and watching over data management plans becomes much more distributed. It becomes reviewers of articles may be involved in it. We talked about whether an institution does some kind of a sign-off on it. We're talking about data repositories and the deposit of the data and their involvement. So it becomes much more of a shared research product throughout the life cycle.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you to all our attendees. As you heard earlier, the video recording will be available in the next few days, and you will get an email when that's available. Stay tuned for our upcoming webinars that we have coming up on the RDC website. And I'll mention that the joint webinar that RDC was going to have with CIHR on February 22nd will be rescheduled to May, but we are tentatively planning to host an RDC webinar at that time. So stay tuned for information on both webinars. And again, thank you very much for joining us today.